Hello there folks and welcome back again to Motorcast, and today it's time for another MotoGP race review, the week after the last race at Mugello in which Dovizioso won, and we were pretty gobsmacked at this, but Dovizioso won his second race in two, followed by the two Hondas of Marquez and Pedrosa, and Matty, just wow, Dovizioso, 2 wins in two, he qualified 7th as well. I don't think anybody was expecting this.
Well, I certainly wasn't. I mean, obviously I was away last time out of Mugello, but seeing the result from that shocked me, and just coming into this race it shocked me again, pleasantly I must say, though, because I do quite like Dovizioso, but I think them getting one win this season was perhaps a bit over their expectations, but get another one on the bounce is really quite impressive.
Yeah, absolutely, and a poor showing from Lorenzo, no question about that. But in terms of Dovizioso, would you say because he's now second in the championship that he's a real title contender?
I think looking at the points, my head says yes, but my heart still isn't convinced that the Ducati is the right package to take it right at the championship. But I guess that's just off past experience or past years with Ducati kind of not really being in the championship fight, but this looks as if it could be the changing point and the point where Ducati start fighting for the championship, and Dovizioso has set himself up beautifully for the rest of the year.
Definitely, and Lorenzo, I mean, we've been a little bit lenient with him so far. Obviously, a new bike, he hasn't got used to it, but we're kind of really sort of not halfway through the season, but a good way into the season now. And he qualified pole, which was brilliant yesterday, no question about that. I appreciate him doing that, but the drop from first to fourth and do it, he dropped, to be fair, he did quite well, didn't he? Because he dropped to, I think it was 8th, wasn't it? And then got back up to 4th. But not a great race for Lorenzo. I mean, compared to his qualifying, it was a disaster, really. We
saw flashes of brilliance at the start, and I thought, well, here's the old Lorenzo back. But I think the problem was he suffered quite a bit with tyre wear, and had to do a stint in the middle where he was perhaps trying to look after the tyres more than he thought he would have to, and kind of thinking that he went too hard on the tyres at the start, perhaps trying to get a gap. But obviously he got the tyres back towards the end and then managed to make up positions that he had lost from pretty early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And going on to the other Ducati team, Pramac, and a really good race from Petrucci once again, a bit like Mugello, and it seems to be quite a few of the same themes coming from Mugello. But sadly he fell. But Redding was lagging behind, but really a good race from Petrucci, but unfortunate to go down, but he shouldn't have gone down, should he? I mean, it was definitely his mistake.
Yeah, he should have definitely gotten the end of that race, and for it to be so close to the end as well is pretty disappointing. But there's still positives to take from that. The Ducatis seem to look as if they've got the pace now, or at least on the previous two tracks. Obviously, we don't have our expert Benny with us to tell us whether Ducatis are good and aren't good historically. But what did he say that the Ducatis would come into play at these two tracks in particular?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So there are some tracks that are Ducati tracks traditionally, aren't they? Yeah.
So Benny, correct as always, and our light of wisdom in these circumstances.
Yeah, sadly not with us today, but oh well. But Petrucci obviously doing well today. Will Lorenzo feel a little bit threatened or not by Petrucci's good performances?
Probably not. He is a multiple world champion, and Petrucci just seems to be finally getting a competitive MotoGP career started. So perhaps probably not at the moment. But if it keeps on going this way, and let's say Petrucci somehow miraculously manages to win a race, then the heat will start to come on to Lorenzo.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Honda then. So, a solid P2 and 3. Marquez had a poor qualifying, came off the bike. And to be honest, with some of those lines and the way he was tucking in for some of the corners, I thought he was going to come off today. But somehow he didn't. But obviously, he finished ahead of his teammate, who qualified in second. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But in terms of Marquez, did his poor qualifying cost him? Because he clearly had the pace, but I mean, you could say that Dovizioso qualified in 7th, so even better for him. But in terms of Marquez, his poor qualifying did definitely cost him, didn't he?
I think it wasn't particularly the qualifying that cost him. I think he looked like a rider who was perhaps on the limit of confidence after going down so often during the weekend. Particularly, you could see that towards the end of the race, where you would traditionally think Marquez would be all on it trying to catch Dovi, who seemed to be coasting for most of the race. But I don't know, maybe there was just a hint in the back of his mind saying, you've already put the bike down, what was it, 5 times during the weekend?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Just bring the bike home, which is quite an unmarked Marquez thought. If it was Marc Marquez from his first season, he would almost certainly be pushing the bike 174%, trying to catch Dovi. But perhaps he just toned it back a little bit and was thinking a bit more about the championship.
Definitely. And Pedrosa, good weekend, would you say?
Yeah, he looked really racy and kind of this similar form to the previous races, where in Pedrosa style he seems to be fighting a lot more.
Yeah, very un-Pedrosa like they were saying on BT, but it's good to see it. I mean, it's definitely healthy for the sport to see a bit more clashing, not necessarily taking people out and touching and contact, but a bit more clashing and a bit more grit, if you like, is certainly good to see. But Yamaha, complete difference. Let's talk a little bit about them. Disastrous qualifying and a real bizarre weekend, because apart from Jerez, I can't really think of a time where Yamaha have done particularly badly, and this is definitely their worst weekend of the season, in qualifying anyway, but a good comeback from them both in the race. Obviously Vinales didn't seem too good at the start of the race, but he did come back at the end. Obviously still in the lead of the championship, but is he still a favourite for the title, Vinales?
I think, well, obviously I still think he is, but we obviously have seen a race which has perhaps exposed a little chink in his armour now, so I think this is, well, pretty much all the Yamahas struggled or at least the two factory Yamahas struggled. So he didn't particularly lose too much out on Rossi, who was Rossi didn't finish highly at all, and Marquez not even in the top 10. But I think we'll probably have to see in the next race, because I mean we've seen a kind of almost like a turn at the top where we've seen Yamaha go from the fastest bike down to third fastest, and we've seen Ducati go from third fastest to outright fastest. So I think there's probably a little bit of evening out to do, and we'll see in the next race whether Yamaha can bring the pace back.
Definitely positive though, isn't it, that Ducati are up there, but it'd certainly be nice to have all 6 riders battling between each other, wouldn't you agree? Yeah, certainly. Certainly, yeah. I mean, Rossi, Marquez, Rossi, Lorenzo, Vinales, Lorenzo, Vinales, Dovizioso. I mean, Dovizioso, as we said earlier, could really be a title challenger, and somebody who obviously won one race last year in Malaysia. He's won 2 on the dot, 2 on the bounce, and hadn't won since 2009, before he won in Malaysia. And he's someone who's quite experienced, but really never really got talk about for a championship at the start of the season. Certainly not by us anyway, so I wonder what Benny will think of that next time, and hopefully Benny will be back for the next race. But on to Tech 3, Yamaha's sister team or junior team or whatever you want to call them. They seem to perform better than the main team all weekend, a little bit like in Le Mans sometimes with the tyres. The Tech 3 definitely isn't the same as the Honda bike. It's definitely not the same as the Honda bike, but it's quite similar to the Yamaha bike, but not necessarily the same, even though it is the same bike, which is particularly weird, but definitely it's different setups. But Zarco pipped Folger at the last second. Folger was ahead of him all weekend, but when it came down to it on the final lap, I believe, Zarco got past him. But is it good to finally see Folger match Zarco? I mean, we're not saying in any circumstance that Folger's driven poorly this season. I think it's just that Zarco's been really, really good. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think we've seen that Zarco has used every single opportunity it seems possible to try and prove that he's the class of his team and just better than his teammate. I think Folger was unlucky though today. But for a man who's often praised for his tyre management, he seemed to really drop off towards the end of the race, and that put him in the clutches of being caught by his teammate. So I think maybe a little bit of inexperience, or perhaps even just nerves getting to him there, or maybe it's just the fact he was trying to keep up with the guys at the front for such a long time that his tyres just had enough. And it's it's just simple things like that which can drop you back. But he is kind of unused to being up in those top positions, especially in the Premier class. So perhaps a little bit to look back on for him, to maybe think, okay, next time I'm in this position, I'll try and take it a little bit easier on the tyres. Perhaps, in a similar kind of vein to what Dovey was doing, just sticking it behind until you have a clear tyre advantage, or until you absolutely have to, and then getting away, running away with it.
Yeah, I saw what you mean, definitely, yeah. But on to Aspar. We don't usually talk about Aspar this early, so if you haven't watched the race, they must have had a good race, and that was certainly right. Really good from Bautista. Abraham lagging behind on the 15th bike. But the question is, after Bautista finished in P7, one place above Valentino Rossi, does he deserve a bigger ride? I mean, he obviously drove for Aprilia last season, but does he deserve that sort of, not maybe Ducati seat, but a ride that's with a better bike? Because the Aspar bike isn't one of the top bikes, is it? It's definitely not.
I mean, this is a guy who's been around for a while now.
Yeah.
Though there's obviously been at points in his career where we have thought he should get on a better bike, and I feel he's been unfortunate to land a spot in the no offense to the Aspar team, but they're not exactly the best team or the best funded team, or in MotoGP, and the way he's driven that bike today is really kind of outperformed it completely. Obviously, it's been a bit of a topsy-turvy race by anyone's recognition, but obviously he's shown his qualities there as a guy who can, he can look after the tyres when needed to, and he can pull the punches as well. He did finish ahead of Valentino Rossi.
I believe he got
and was fighting with the Tech 3 pair for a while.
Yeah, I believe he got a 5th early in the season, so it's definitely not a fluke. But Abraham's still doing decently. I think he got 2 points in the end, just ahead of Rabat. So certainly not bad from him, but a good race overall from the Aspar team today.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. They can be very proud of their riders today.
Yeah, let's go on to another team then. LCR Honda with Cal Crutchlow, who seemed to be quite happy today, actually, before the race. And it was quite bizarre because he said even though that they qualified in 17th, that he was happy with it because apparently that they were a lot quicker. And he finished in 11th in the end, so not necessarily the most positions gained out of everyone, but on a normal day, it would have been a very good result because he got past. I mean, he didn't get past anybody spectacular, but he got past some of the satellite bikes, and that was crucial. But he's had a poor weekend, no question about that. But he's had one podium and a P4 and 5 so far this season. But as clearly shown today and by other weekends where he's gone off the bike, his form's been rocky, so. I think there's no question about it, but is consistency key for somebody like Crutchlow who wants to not necessarily mount a championship charge, but somebody who wants to get highly up in the championship? Consistency is definitely key, isn't it, for him?
Yeah, and Crutchlow's a man who in the past has perhaps struggled, well, in more recent history has struggled with consistency. If you look back to especially his time before his Ducati move, he was incredibly consistent, and that's where he got most of his points from. But in terms of this weekend, I think it's more or less he's recovered from what could have been a poorer result. Qualifying down in 17th and to get up to 11th and getting some decent, solid points, you can be reasonably happy with that. Obviously, you'll be looking at the factory Hondas and thinking, where is my pace compared to them? And, well, you do lose time, obviously, trying to overtake the back markers. But I was perhaps imagining that he would finish a bit higher than 11th. But obviously this race has kind of thrown everything on its head, so I think he can be reasonably happy with what can be counted as a recovery ride.
Yeah, as you said earlier, topsy-turvy weekend and something that we don't get every week in MotoGP, but certainly nice to see something even out the field. But on to the next team then, Aprilia. We don't usually talk about Aprilia this late either, so must have been a good race for them, and it wasn't. Lowe's at the back, Sam Lowe's. You can't criticise him too much, but, he's at the back, so that kind of says all that you want to say. I don't want to criticise him too much, but you get the gist. But the bike failed Espargaro, who's outperformed that bike. You forget that's a factory bike as well. So, Espargaro definitely doing well on that bike. but the bike failed him again, and he's been really unlucky this season, hasn't he? Because he's drove particularly well, but he hasn't had the reliability at all times, has he, to support him?
No, and it's another case of him being solidly in the top 10 and the bike letting go, just like you said. It was always going to be a development year for Aprilia, even despite the fact that they were in last year as well. I mean, the bike was never going to be up right near the front. But we know what Espargaro can do, so, given the right conditions, he can get the bike probably on a podium. But I think it's probably more of a weekend of what could have been for him, and it's the most disappointing way to go out to have a bike failure, because there's nothing you could have done, which for some people is perhaps they'd think, oh well, I did the best I could, but for others, and I think Espargaro is perhaps thinking, well, that's another result gone because of a bike failure. You're going to sort the bike out for me properly next time.
Yeah, I think he needs Lowe's bike, because Lowe's bike never seems to break down, weirdly. But there we go. But on to Marc VDS, and you'll be very happy to hear that championship contender Rabat scored a point.
Our
but
hero.
Miller fell off. Let's talk a little bit about it, because obviously you support Rabat quite openly. Let's talk about Rabat from last weekend, because obviously we didn't get a chance. He did very well in Mugello, didn't he?
He did a decent job getting some more decent points. And his championship run is starting to gather a bit of momentum now.
Absolutely. But on to this weekend, he scored 8 points, so, as you can see, building up those foundations just to get up to the top. But Miller fell off. But as is the case with Petrucci, good progress from him, today. It was unfortunate, obviously, that he fell off, but, good progress from Miller in the race. And he was up to as high as 10th as at one point. And with Aston coming in 2 weeks, I bet he's quite excited for that race, especially if the rain starts coming down again.
Yeah, he'll be doing a rain dance as soon as he gets into Holland. I think it's obviously he was running fairly strong in that race, but I think it's just another case which is the same as Petrucci, to be honest, where you'll be ruined that because he was on for some decent points, a decent finish, and perhaps, if he had gotten a decent result here, he would have had the confidence going into his favourite race next time out to maybe stick it on the podium or something like that. Obviously that would need, I think, some more really changeable conditions, but I think he'll definitely be looking to Holland now, trying to perhaps replicate what he did, or trying to get into a similar vein of mind that he was last time out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marc VDS decent today, but unfortunate for Miller that he went out. But on to Suzuki, and we don't usually have any of the constructors and factory teams this late, but KTM are to come a bit later. But weird for Suzuki today. It's been a disaster this weekend, no questions about that. But the poor form continues. Guintoli was close to Iannone, suggesting an issue for Iannone. He was only a few seconds off was Guintoli. And I said this last week with Benny, Viñales was there last season getting solid results, but they're kind of even getting to the points this weekend. I mean, this is a disastrous season for Suzuki, isn't it?
Especially considering where they were last season. You would have thought this season would have been almost a race, a charge to get a race win or two, or even an outside shot at a championship. But they've really slipped back, and it's not as if the riders aren't doing anything. They've got a brilliant rider in Andrea Iannone, who really raced the wheels off the Ducati last year, and you've got Sylvain Guintoli, who's a World Superbike champion. So it's not as if they don't have the experience there. I think they're simply just lacking the race pace, or even just a bit of confidence as well. Obviously, they've had a bit of restructuring behind the scenes with their lead project manager getting the sack. So I think it's really kind of unsettling times at the moment for Suzuki, and they really need to get their act sorted out.
Yeah, it's not good at all, is it? No question about that. And hopefully they can improve quickly. But, we're sort of 7 races in, and it doesn't seem that Suzuki are improving at all, which is quite worrying. I mean, with the likes, with some of the satellite bikes beating them on a regular occasion, it's really worrying for them. But unfortunate, but what can you do? Let's talk about another factory team then, KTM. Bradley Smith was a DNS because did he break his finger or fracture his finger after a crash yesterday?
I've only seen the picture of it, and that it did not look good.
Yeah, fair enough that he wasn't racing. But on to KTM. They obviously only had one bike today. But Espargaro was quite a way off. The only person to finish behind him was Sam Lowes on the Aprilia. And after such positive press about how much they've come through and getting in Q2 and Le Mans, they've stepped back, haven't they? There's no question about that. But do you think that's down to the other bikes have maybe had upgrades and they haven't? Or is it just that they've had a bit of an unfortunate weekend with obviously only the one bike out there?
I think it's just a bit of an unfortunate weekend. And perhaps maybe a little hint of Catalunya perhaps not catering to the bike very well. So I think they've been on a high in terms of for their standards recently, and I don't think they'll let one bad race weekend really get them down. And I'm sure Bradley Smith and Paul Espargaro have got the drive to push the bike as hard as they can. It is a disappointing result, but obviously on to the next one, and the development continues with KTM.
Yeah, onwards and upwards, absolutely. And on to the final team now before we discuss the next race in Assen. I can't wait to discuss that. But Real, Barbara and Baz both scoring points. Nothing particularly special, but Barbara in ninth was a commendable result. What are your general thoughts on Real? Not really many talking points.
Just a very strong weekend by their standards. To get two guys in the points is really quite good. Taking advantage of what's been as we said before, topsy-turvy weekend. And, they're solid points that will hopefully, in terms of their eyes, get them off the bottom of the table. But I think both riders can be very happy with how this weekend's gone for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And on to the preview for the next race, the Dutch TT. And now, it needs no introduction, last year's race. It was the most dramatic race of the season. Jack Miller won. That doesn't need any introduction. Marquez was second, and Scott Redding was third. Rossi went out, Vizioso went out, Petrucci went out. It was just absolute chaos, wasn't it? It was wet. And I believe, unfortunately, Matty, that you won't be able to do the review for that weekend.
No, what weekend is it?
It's in 2 weeks, so it's the Baku weekend.
No, I'm not available to do that. So it'll just be you and Benny, or perhaps Dan will turn up.
Me and Dan, yeah, good joke. But no, let's talk about this race. Even though you won't be here, let's just hear your predictions. Who's going to win that race? And don't say Rabat.
Oh man, I mean, Rabat could win the race if given the right conditions. I think I just have a little feeling that it's going to be Pedrosa. He's been with him being on decent run of form, despite the crash in the third place where he didn't look quite at it. He did of course lead the race today for quite a while. I just have a little feeling that it's going to be him.
Interesting. So your top three, 2 places behind that.
I'm going to go Marquez second and Dovi third.
Oh, interesting. I don't really know what to predict for this one, because after today's wide open race, it could literally be anyone. So you're not putting either of the Yamahas in your top three?
I think they can get on the podium, but just with form at the moment, that's my podium.
I'm going to go for a Lorenzo pole again, but he's not going to get the podium, a bit like today. There's no reason why Dovizioso can't get a third win on the row, and that would be really good for him. But I'm going to go with a Marquez win, with Pedrosa just behind, and I'm going to go in third place. Why not Dovizioso? But yeah, that's in 2 weeks' time. Been a really exciting race today. A lot happening, and there's a hell of a lot of coverage on Motorcast this weekend. I believe this is the first of 6 podcasts. We've got this, the F1 podcast, Formula E podcast, WRC, WRX, and BTCC. So plenty, absolutely plenty to get your teeth into in the next few days. And I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Just been me and Matty, and thank you very much, Matty, for coming on. And that is it for today's MotoGP podcast. Apart from one little question I will ask at the end: who was your driver of the day today?
Dovi. Simple
there was no question about that. I thought you might have said Rabat, but I suppose everyone gets their opinion. But thank you very much for watching, guys. Make sure to like this and share it if you liked the video and the podcast. But apart from that, we will see you in 2 weeks. So we'll see you then. Bye for now.